One of the most challenging tasks that I have as a nutrition, fitness, and health coach to women who are nearing 50 and above is helping them with nutrition. And it's not a matter of knowledge. I have the knowledge. I can supply them with a very good nutrition program. I can give them a list of the best food choices. I can help them to find their macros, which is their protein, carbs, and fats. I can teach them how to track food and learn about what foods work best for their body. But the problem isn't with the content. The problem isn't with the knowledge. It's with the implementation. Many women already know that what they're eating isn't the best thing for their body. But the nature of processed foods, and in particular, ultra processed foods, which I'm going to break down in just a moment what I mean by ultra processed. The problem with these foods is that they are highly addictive in nature, particularly sugar, which comes disguised under many different names, too many names for me to list off on this episode. But it's hidden. And so oftentimes when women don't see sugar on the label of things, they assume that there are not sugars in that food, or there's not really a significant sugar count. It's very sneaky. I did a podcast, it's been a few months ago, on sugar, and I will link to that podcast in the show notes because these two episodes will go together really well so that you can understand where I'm coming from when I talk about hidden sugars. So let's go back to what constitutes ultra processed food. So there are actually processed foods that are healthy. If you can think about quinoa, for example, anything really that's in a package, such as brown rice or quinoa or lentils or beans in a can, it's processed because it's out of its natural state and it's put into a package or a can, or it's changed or modified in some way. And not every modification means a food is unhealthy or that it's not wholesome. What I'm talking about is ultra processed, what I refer to as Frankenstein food. It's not actually real food. It contains so many additives. It is sprayed with pesticides, glyphosate, toxins. It can even result in people getting parasites. Those are the types of foods that I'm referring to. Another problem with these foods is they are deliberately designed to be highly addictive, to be highly palatable, meaning when they hit your mouth, when they hit your tongue, you don't even have to chew much. It just goes down so easy. If you think about a hamburger from a fast food restaurant, and I'm not going to name names here, it goes down very easy. You can barely have to chew. If you make a grass-fed, grass-finished burger from home, all natural organic substances as much as you can get, you're going to chew that burger. Think of vegetables. You're going to chew vegetables. You have to work. And we have teeth designed for chewing vegetables, fruits, seeds, nuts, and meats. We're designed to chew. We have the right kind of teeth for that. But when we don't have to chew much and it's just kind of sliding straight down, that is the addictive part of the food when it is just so palatable. And you think of things that are super creamy, like ice cream, and just go down so easy. So, what can we do? Now, I want to talk about how we can move away from ultra processed food. It's not the easiest thing, and this is the difficult part of coaching. I supply women in all of my programs, really: Slim Stomach Solution, IF45, which is intermittent fasting, and my signature program, which is Fit and Fierce for women over 50. I supply them with an extensive list of foods to choose from. So there's no question as to what the best things are, and there's not a lack of variety. My food list for Fit and Fierce, for example, goes on for several pages. I have a guide that I give them. And I encourage them in the first few weeks simply to eat more wholesome, natural, organic, nutritious foods and crowd out the processed foods. So in order, they're eating less ultra processed, they're eating more wholesome foods. And this can work really well. Another tactic is getting enough protein. If you're getting enough protein, which just to simplify here, there's different formulas if you search this, but in general, it's 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight. But for most women, if you're getting 100 grams per day, you're doing well. So don't get too hung up on the ideal body weight. If you're reaching 100 grams, I'm very happy with that. So protein is extremely satiating. It's very filling, and it leaves less room for eating other things that aren't the best choices for our bodies. But we're still going to deal with those cravings. Now, you can do what I did, which was to completely cut out ultra processed foods and white knuckle it, but it's a difficult process. I remember going through that for my very first bodybuilding show that I did. And I didn't know much at the time, but my coach told me, eat this and not that, and handed me a meal plan, and I followed it. But when the cravings came, they were pretty intense and it was hard. And as soon as I finished the show, I caught myself going right back to some of those foods. So sometimes that cannot be the best choice. So what I want you to do is just be cognizant, be aware of what you're chewing. Of course, you're going to be aware of what you're chewing. Be aware of what you're choosing and track it perhaps. Either write it in a journal or use an app like MyFitnessPal. There's a lot of different apps right now to choose from. You can research them, choose the one that works best for you, and just start tracking your food and getting aware of how much protein that you're bringing in. And then look at your food choices. How much are actually very, what I call clean foods, things like sweet potato, grass fed, grass finished beef, wild caught fish and shrimp, shellfish of all different kinds, lentils, beans, if you can tolerate them, fresh organic vegetables and fruits. How many of those are you getting? And then how many of the more ultra processed foods are you taking in? And what you'll find is this will bring an awareness. But for many of us, we're still going to be struggling with that addictive nature of the food. And just understand that it takes time. It takes time to move away from this, but you also have to make a commitment to yourself. And you've got to be uncomfortable at times. It's going to be uncomfortable to say no to something that you're used to having that you think tastes good. But trust me on this, if you stick with it, if you move away from the ultra processed food, you will actually lose your taste for it. In fact, you'll find that many things that contain a lot of sugar will taste sickeningly sweet. You won't want them anymore. They're too much. Or foods drenched in seed oils won't taste good. You'll taste that artificial flavor. You won't like it. As we move a little bit further into this discussion, I really want to hone in on the sugar and share with you a few things that you may find helpful, because when we understand things, when we understand the reasons behind things, it can make it much easier to make a change. It can make it much easier to speak to yourself with your inner dialogue when you understand. And that's going to, what I just said is going to make sense when I share these things with you. So, just a statistic here, on average, Americans eat over 17 teaspoons of sugar a day, and most of the sugar is sneaky that gets into your diet. Sugar consumption was 5 pounds per person per year in the 1900s, and now it's over 150 pounds per person per year. I'll say that again. In the 1900s, it was 5 pounds of sugar per person per year. Now it's 150 pounds on average per person per year. So why do we crave sugar and why are we eating 150 pounds of sugar? Well, first of all, it's snuck in, so we're probably not aware we are consuming that much sugar. Almost all foods we eat are used to make energy. And the main form of energy that we make is something called ATP. I'm not going to go into all the science, but just remember it's ATP. It's a form of energy. And we use it to do things. We use it to do our daily task. We use it for talking to somebody. We use it for pretty much anything that expends energy. Now, if we make extra energy, that is typically stored as body fat. So we want to have high ATP, a high amount of energy that gives us the energy we need, but we obviously don't want to be storing excess body fat. We need some of these reserves. Of course we do. Body fat is not a bad thing when we have it in the right amounts or right percentages. So keep that in mind. I'm not saying skinny here. I'm saying the right amount of body fat. So let's look at fructose because fructose is key here. So fructose is actually a nutrient that helps you store fat. It's the only nutrient that when you eat it, the energy is stored as fat rather than ATP. I'll say that again. So fructose is the only nutrient where when we eat it, the energy is stored as fat and not as the ATP, which is what we want. It lowers the ATP in the cell, so it lowers the energy in the cell. So anytime your cellular energy is lowered, you are hungry. Think of not getting a good night's sleep and being exhausted. Have you ever noticed how many cravings you have and how hungry you are? And typically it's not for broccoli or asparagus. You're hungry for that quick kind of energy, which is, of course, is going to be usually sugary carbohydrates. So you're hungry and it makes you feel like you're just starving. It blocks the ability of your fat to break down, and the result is that you're hungry and you're eating this food, which is energy, but it's being converted to fat and it's not being produced as ATP. So you get hungry for more and more things that are going to break down into fructose or have fructose as opposed to things like, let's say, fresh vegetables. Like I said, you're wanting that sugary, quick fix because your brain and your body is starved for energy. It's starved for the ATP. It makes you think you don't have enough energy. So you're getting this signal from your brain saying, I don't have enough energy. So the tendency is to want to consume more and more fructose. Fructose ignites a biological survival pathway. I know that's a mouthful. And in the past, this survival mechanism prepared us for times when there wasn't enough food around. When you eat fructose, the first 4 or 5 grams gets inactivated in the intestine, but the fructose that gets into the intestine gets to the liver and the liver reacts. So if the concentrations of that fructose are extremely high, you will ignite the survival activation mechanism that I talked about, the survival switch. And things that can do this are juices like apple juice or orange juice. Now, apples and oranges are fine, but when they're in the juice form, it is like mainlining sugar. Other things, of course, are going to be soda pop. Liquid sugar really hits the system pretty quickly. We even need to be careful with things like agave and honey. I hear people say it's natural. Well, too much of a natural thing can even be an issue as well. Our bodies have the ability to take glucose, blood sugar, and convert it to fructose. When this occurs, it affects a hormone called leptin. Leptin tells us that we're satisfied, we're full, push the plate away, I've had enough to eat. If we don't produce enough leptin or we're leptin resistant, we don't get that signal. So we want to keep eating, we want to keep consuming these foods. So there are some signs here that we need to watch out for concerning sugar. And when I say sugar, I'm not just talking about table sugar. I'm talking once again about the hidden sugars, corn syrups, the sugars that are contained within our foods that are hidden through carbohydrates, refined carbohydrates in particular. So you could be eating a pasta and consuming sugar because carbohydrate is converted into glucose. So signs are this. Number one, you cannot go more than 2 to 3 hours without having cravings without needing to eat. You get kind of that hangry, sort of shaky feeling. And this once again can occur even if you're not eating a bunch of sweets, but you're eating a lot of refined carbohydrates with the hidden sugars. Number two is you lose weight, but your waist size, your waist circumference remains the same. So you're not going down. I've seen this with clients that use only calories to lose weight or calories and high amounts of activity. So basically, they're starving themselves and over exercising. And then I'll look at the food log, and there's a whole bunch of foods in there that are ultra processed, high in sugar, and when I look at the data in the app, I'll see that the weight's going down. Yes, that's been one of our goals, but the shape of their body isn't changing. Their waist is exactly the same. So it's something to look out for. So measuring your waist and your hips is something that I suggest. There are three measurements you can take. You can take the waist at the smallest area. That is my preference, which is usually for a lot of people just below the rib cage. So I'm very short waisted. So if I measured at my navel, my navel is almost it's I'm just very short waist. I don't have much of a waist and it's not at my navel. So I measure at the smallest part just under the rib cage. You don't want to squeeze the tape to make the number smaller, and look in the mirror and kind of twirl around and make sure that the tape is even. You want to measure your uh, hips. So at the widest part of the hips, the circumference, and then you can do the waist to hip ratio to find your metabolic health. And also you can measure around the abdominal region, which would be right around the navel, but understanding that is going to be a bigger number. So you're looking at all of these measurements to help you determine, are you losing actual body fat, or are you just losing scale weight, and potentially muscle or even dehydration can be occurring. We don't want to lose our skeletal muscle. That's only going to slow down our metabolism and make things harder down the road. Number three is you need something sweet or a dessert after each and every meal. And that used to be me. That's how I grew up. My mom was a big sugar eater. She did not have a weight problem, and she actually had a beautiful figure, great genetics there. And I got some of that from mom. Thank you, mom. But she wanted to have something sweet after every meal. Now, she did not overindulge. It was usually like one piece of pie, three cookies. Sometimes she would have a piece of toast with peanut butter and jam. It was usually just small something, but she felt like she needed something after every meal with the exception of breakfast. So that would be something to look for. Number four is you experience symptoms of low blood sugar, and you will know when your blood sugar is doing this. What can happen is we eat, insulin comes in, so insulin spikes up. Its job is to shuttle that blood glucose from your meal into the cells to be used for energy. So it kind of comes in and mops everything up, but your body overcorrects by releasing too much insulin. If you're eating a lot of sugar and you're eating frequently and you're grazing and you're snacking, you get this overcorrection of insulin. So you're releasing too much. And because insulin's job is to get that blood sugar out, really out of the bloodstream and into the cells where it can be used for energy and for glucose later on when we need it, it is often sending too much. So let me rephrase that a little bit. That overcorrection of insulin coming in, trying to do that job, trying to clean up the glucose mess, causes that overcorrection. Too much is flooding in, and it can cause these high highs, and then you spike down the other side. So the glucose comes crashing down the other side. With that comes this shaky, sweaty, nervous, anxiety feeling. You may have had that irritable, hangry. You might feel confused even and dizzy. You might even be angry. So this has happened to me because I was on a bodybuilder type meal plan or eating regimen for many, many years, probably about a decade before I found intermittent fasting and introduced that into my lifestyle. And what it was is the foods weren't necessarily bad foods, but in the off season, the time when you're not competing, you're trying to put on more muscle. So you're generally eating more food, more carbohydrates. And a popular thing to do was the white rice, every single meal, 6 meals a day, every 2 hours. I reached a point where I couldn't go 2 hours without that shaky, dizzy, hangry feeling. So you may recognize that. Hidden sugars are often in carbohydrates, as I mentioned, and all carbs, remember, turn into sugar. So you need to know which ones to choose and which ones to limit. The more sweet you eat, the more sweet you want. And then it starts creating those blood sugar imbalances that I just talked about and something called insulin resistance, where insulin's coming in, but your body isn't recognizing it anymore. And so it's not responding. It's not bringing down the glucose levels. It's not managing the glucose levels. So you're getting those sharp highs, those spikes, and those lows. In turn, this causes you to crave sweets. And if you're under stress or not getting quality sleep, as I mentioned, this is much, much worse. So, what can you do? Do not quit cold turkey. I mentioned this at the beginning of the podcast. And oftentimes, I have talked about the need to get rid of the ultra processed food and the sugar because it's so addictive and you can't moderate something that's addictive. Think about it. Think of addictive substances that we know of, such as certain drugs and alcohol. Can't really moderate that. It's really difficult to do, if not impossible. But there are a few hacks you can do. And as I mentioned, eating more protein, having the right kinds of fats is another one because it's very satisfying. Having enough fiber in your diet because it's filling. And then also gradually stretching out those meals, getting rid of the snacks can get rid of those hunger signals. But you really don't want to white knuckle this. You want to taper your sugar down. And one of my favorite things is switching things out, doing food swaps. This is really was made popular actually by JJ Virgin. If you don't know her, check her out and check out her podcast, JJ Virgin. Love the information that she puts out and also the supplements she puts out as well. I don't receive anything for mentioning that. I just like to share the knowledge because this is something that has helped me and helped my clients. But what you do is you swap out a high sugar impact food for a medium one. And then you begin swapping out the medium ones for the low ones. So it's this transition. You transition away from fructose as you go from medium to low. So you're getting rid of the high sugar impact, moving down to the medium sugar impact, and then from there down to the low sugar impact. You can still have a few of the medium impact in there, but you just want to moderate those once you get past that feeling of addiction to the sugar. Over time, food tastes too sweet. As I mentioned, you become empowered by learning how to balance blood sugar levels, burn fat, and boost your metabolism. Number two is how you put your meals together matters. And I already talked about this earlier. Protein first, you want to get enough. It helps with the sugar cravings and it's filling, it's satiating, it slows the glucose impact. So it will slow down that sugar impact. Then you want to add in your non starchy vegetables, very filling. You can eat a lot of those and fiber. Many of them are rich in fiber. That slows down the sugar impact as well, and it's satiating. And finally, your healthy fats, which also slow the sugar impact down and make you feel more satisfied. Number three, add a few hacks into your diet. Having things that are sour can help because it breaks that pattern, like lemon juice, and it also helps with blood sugar balance. A tablespoon of or two of lemon juice before a meal can lower blood sugar response. So does apple cider vinegar. Ginger is another great one that they've looked at. There's actually some research that was published in the Journal of Pharmaceutical Research, the Iranian Journal of Pharmaceutical Research in 2015. They looked at how ginger impacted blood sugar levels among people with type 2 diabetes. And what they found was that ginger can actually improve your blood sugar balance and help cells better use the glucose, which is what we want. The phytochemicals in cinnamon is another hack. that can help blood sugar metabolism by 20 times or more. The active ingredient in cinnamon can mimic the effects of insulin. Isn't that wild? To get glucose into the cells. Pretty crazy stuff that what we have is right in nature. So, apple cider vinegar, lemon juice, these improve insulin sensitivity, lower blood sugar response, and then add in your ginger and cinnamon. Number 4 is train your brain. Train your brain. You want to get your taste buds to really appreciate sour. You want to be able to taste salty, spicy, umami, which is that kind of Japanese taste. When you eat too much sugar, you actually really destroy your ability to taste real food. It doesn't taste good at first. I know it didn't to me at first. It took time. Now I crave things that are whole natural foods. I crave these things. Number 5 is you want to gradually pull fructose out of your diet, which I talked about earlier. So there's some overlap here. The more fructose you eat, the better you get at transporting that fructose to the liver. And when it's transported to the liver, that's what causes fatty liver disease. We start to store this as fat, and particularly around the organs, this is the dangerous visceral body fat. So we really want to taper away from that fructose, as I mentioned. This is generally going to be the artificial fructose that is found within ultra-processed foods. Fruits are different. They contain fiber and natural sugars. But with that being said, you still need to modify your fruit intake. You cannot just eat fruit all day long. Next up is meal timing. Number 6 is meal timing. Even just doing a 12-hour overnight fast and spacing out meals, eliminating snacking, can really help to stabilize blood glucose levels and over time will help with cravings, hunger, and boost your energy, believe it or not. You may have a little rough go as you transition. I always recommend, especially in the IF45 program that I teach, that women transition slowly. If they're used to only doing an 8-hour fast, do a 10. If they do a 10, do it 11 or 12. Go very slowly. You want to eliminate the nighttime eating and the snacking. When you're eating at night, your melatonin is elevated and your insulin secretions are lowered and you're less insulin sensitive at that time. So you don't want to be taking in a bunch of sugary foods at that time when you're not insulin sensitive and able to process out that blood glucose. This keeps that blood sugar around, causing a higher fasting blood sugar level in the morning and poor sleep. So I'll say that again. If you're eating late at night, right before bed, what you're causing is this spike in blood sugar, a higher fasting blood sugar. So when you wake up, it's already at a higher level in the morning and you get a poor night's sleep. And I have seen this with my Aura Ring. Number 7 is you want to put on muscle to restore insulin sensitivity. You want to lift heavy enough to get a stimulus. Obviously, be safe here, move slowly, hire a trainer, but you need to have some sort of stimulus on the muscle so that you can actually build muscle. It's not going to happen with, running around the room with pink dumbbells. You want to have that stimulus and eat the protein so that those carbs have somewhere to go. So when you have muscle, the carbohydrates can go into the muscle, and the muscle is like a sink, a disposal for the excess blood glucose. It's going to mop that all up, and we want that. So, one of the first places that we get insulin resistance is in the muscles, especially as women, because we lose our muscle at an accelerated rate over 40, 50, and 60. It just accelerates with the decades. Skeletal muscle is one of the fastest places that we can restore that insulin sensitivity and muscle and the liver. If you've got better insulin sensitivity, your body doesn't push out as much insulin in response to sugar. Insulin is inflammatory. It is a necessary hormone. It's a good hormone, but it can be inflammatory and it can actually lock the doors, bolt and lock the doors to the fat cells. We do not want our fat cells locked up. So we want to be insulin sensitive. Number 8 is sleep and stress. And I mentioned this before. You get a poor night's sleep and you're going to be more insulin resistant and hangry for sugary refined carbs. Stress impacts your sleep. And when you're under stress, you tend to lower your serotonin levels, which makes you crave even more sugar. You break down muscle and you have higher fasting blood sugar. You don't want high fasting blood sugar. You don't want high fasting blood sugar that's 100 and higher in the morning. You want that number low. You're more catabolic, meaning you're more likely to eat up your muscle, break down your muscle, which can then again raise insulin levels because we're losing insulin sensitivity in our muscles. Poor sleep and stress, as I mentioned, is associated with cravings. Stress lowers your stomach acid, and that impacts your gut and can cause candida overgrowth. I had a candida expert on the show. I will link to that podcast as well. Very interesting. An overgrowth of candida makes you crave sugar, among other things. It wreaks havoc. There is some supplementation that can help. Fish oil, just be sure that you buy a pure product. Berberine, but be careful with that. Some people don't respond well. Vitamin D can be good, but not if you're dealing with candida, which Dr. Biamonte in the episode that I recorded last week, as a matter of fact, speaks about this. There are certain supplements that they're not bad supplements, but you do want to avoid. So I will link to that in the show notes. So I hope this was helpful for you. We covered a lot of ground in a short time. As always, I would love to hear from you. The best place to reach me is to message me on Instagram. My account is at Carol Covino Fitness. That's at Carol Covino Fitness. I'm also on Facebook, once again, Covino Fitness. And I would love to have you as part of my book launch. My book is going to be launching very, very soon this spring. So it's coming up quickly. And I really need your help. I need a good size launch team to help me. If you're worried about time or commitment, I have 3 different levels from more commitment to a very simple, no time involved, no money involved type commitment. Don't worry, you're not going to be spammed or receive a bunch of emails from me. I do ask for a number uh, to that I can text you, but again, I will send something out where you can opt into those texts. I won't just bombard you with those. So I'm going to put the link up to this book launch team that I would love for you to be a part of. I'll put that up in the show notes. Be sure to go in there and click. If you don't find it, message me on Instagram. The book is once again going to be released probably in April, possibly early May. There's a few things beyond my control here. It's called Finding Purpose in the Pause. Finding Purpose in the Pause, your guide to thriving in menopause and beyond. If you are in the years prior to menopause, this is going to benefit you as well. And even husbands out there or partners that might be listening, you can actually help your partner, help your spouse by having this knowledge. So I hope to have you on my book launch team. I also have a link up in the show notes for my Fit and Fierce program for women over 50. It is a 12-week program. It is really the most extensive high touch program that I do. It is the only way to work with me in a one-on-one capacity. So I'll put the link up to that so you can check it out in the show notes. Thank you for being with me today. Hope this was all helpful. And until next time, I wish you every blessing. Bye for now.